title of this, what's the difference, men, women? I always love Launchpad during the presidential campaign because the topics, that what you're going through is exactly, or a variation thereof, of what they're going through, right? They're looking for a job.
Without the money.
And, yeah, without the money, of course. But they're looking for a job. The candidates are looking for a job, and we, the voters, are the hiring managers. We decide who gets hired. And the debates, the interviews, they're all very similar. They post their written qualifications in newspapers and so forth, just like a resume. And so we're deciding which one, the male, the female, is going to get the job. And that it comes down to that all sorts of times. And various biases, prejudices, preconceived ideas often come into play when we vote for somebody, the same way they come into play when somebody gets hired. And the when you compare qualifications in my classes that I teach, any of you who come through my classes are sick of this because I write this on the board at the beginning of every single class I teach, that your qualifications fall in 3 or 4 categories. Experience, education, attributes, of course, characteristics that you've all been gathering and hauling around with you since you were born. Attributes include your personality and your attitude and your enthusiasm and your sense of humor and your body language and your appearance and your whether you're a leader or a follower, a smiler, a frowner, an optimist, a pessimist, an introvert, an extrovert. All of those things are attributes that create an impression, and they're a huge chunk of who you are and how you are perceived by others. And then there's personal stuff. Personal stuff includes all of the EEOC information. It includes your religion, your race, your age, your gender, country of origin, handicaps. I throw politics into personal. I've seen people get hired or not get hired because of a bumper sticker. Sexual orientation can go into personal. Sometimes family goes into personal. I have a stepdaughter who is a director of sponsorships for SAP and is currently at the draft, I think, because she gets to go there and to Formula One races, and she's like this with the Williams sisters. She has this wonderful job that exposes her to terrific things, and she does really, really well. She's recently was featured on a video. One of the places they sponsor is Cirque du Soleil, and she coordinated how Cirque du Soleil can utilize interactive SAP technology in order to enhance their shows. And so she came up with a very good solution to that. So she really performs well, and recently got passed up for a promotion. They promoted one of her peers, one of her colleagues, put him over her, and they said, you know, it was such a tough decision, but we gave it to him because he's married and has a family to support. And so you can't claim that it was gender bias necessarily, but it was a personal piece of information that perhaps should not have been considered in making a hiring decision, as all the EEOC things, your sexual orientation, none of that stuff should matter. It should go to the person who has the best qualifications. But sometimes those personal things do color whom we vote for, and they color who gets the job, right? Additional data that sometimes is considered when they're trying to make a decision between the male and the female. When you would just look at, and this is not anything about politics really, it's just interesting, when you look at the credentials, the qualifications of those particular two, Trump and Hillary, when you look at those two, when you look at their qualifications, it sort of depends on, do you put more emphasis on experience in government and doing those things, having those leadership qualifications, or do you put more credibility onto business acumen, leadership perhaps, management, I don't know, which things do you think are the most important? But the data that so often people pay attention to is the additional data, which is perhaps not data at all, but it's biases, it's things that we attribute to people who are of one gender or another. And you've all heard all of this stuff. These days, the last time I heard Trump talk about Clinton, he said, "Why is she always shouting? Why she's shouting?" And that's like a shrewish female kind of thing. All politicians are screaming at you. It doesn't matter if they're male or female. They're all yelling at you. I think I just wanted to point out one thing. I know you can't really read this very well. Now we have so much light. Last Friday, it was like being in a singles bar where we all looked good though. But so you've got everything is pretty much alphabetized, except at the very top they've added one more to the female side, which is unexcitable. It's like, who put that in at the top? You know, I don't know who made the list, but it also has excitable in the alphabetized portion. So this, they've attributed both being excitable and unexcitable. So maybe, I'm not even going to go with where that came from. Whoever made the list had a bad night, I guess, and threw unexcitable up at the top. Yeah. But anyway, there's all these loaded attributes that we assign to people, sometimes based on things like gender. This is part one of a two-part presentation, and part two is going to be a little bit more scientific, not so much emotionally charged, and it's going to be based on assessments, scientific assessments, and it's going to be on unconscious bias. And it's things, associations that we make unconsciously that prejudice us. Sometimes we don't, it happens, and then we autocorrect because we have assumed something, and then we realize, oh, that's prejudicial, and then and we autocorrect and we say, no, they could do that they could be just fine. And one of the word associations that's in there, I think there's a test, and the test came out of Harvard. I'm going to see if I can get the test and give it to you. And then also Facebook is trying to, Facebook and Google and a lot of the high-tech companies are trying to get more diversity in their workforce. And so they're trying to identify unconscious bias and correct it. And so Facebook has made public their training program for how to identify and correct unconscious bias. And so I'm going to try to pull that up too. I tried to pull it up at work, and I was barred from Facebook at work. But at any rate, one of the things that I read about it was they say, which of these do you immediately think female, and which of these do you immediately think male? And one of the words is laundry, and one of the words is briefcase. And whether you're prejudiced or not prejudiced, that's a telling little exercise to do. Anyway, so there's all that additional stuff. Technology, gender stats. Women hold 26% of tech jobs. Women of color, 3% of tech jobs. 56% of women in tech leave mid-career. And when that happens, only 20% of them return to tech. I've had some people who have really struggled with that. We've had some folks come through Launchpad who've taken time off to raise a family or to take care of somebody that they needed to take care of. And then they try to come back into the tech world, and they're told that that's impossible. Their skills are obsolete. Even if they go back to school, sometimes it's difficult for them to ever get that door opened again. And so they end up doing other things. So companies have to be a little bit more understanding of that sort of thing. The statistics came from the latest edition of Austin Woman. Austin Woman is a free publication. You can pick it up at lots of different stores. I got this through Central Market. But this particular one is Women in Tech. And it's got, it's got a CEO who's 27 and a CMO, I think, who's 25. It's kind of depressing. But two of the people, I'm going to try to get these folks to come talk to Launchpad at the end of May if I possibly can. Two of these women, and lots of you are going to want to know about them because they have a staffing company that has tapped into a need. If you're going to start a business, you have to figure out what is the perceived need. And they know that tech companies are trying as hard as they can to have more diverse workforces. They have finally come around to figuring out why that is a good thing. And so they say, but we can't find the people, we can't find them, they're not out there. So this is a staffing company that says we will fill that need. And it's called Recruiter, Recruit, H-E-R. And one of the owners of the company is a PhD diversity expert. She's been a consultant all over the place on the diversity in the workplace. And the other one is a recruiter. And so they have paired up on this, but let me explain their mission. They connect candidates with tech companies that provide inclusive and supportive workplaces for women and other unrepresented groups. And so they're also trying to vet the companies as to whether these are going to be places that are going to be have a good work environment for our candidates. And so they ask them things like, what is your promotion policy? And what is your family leave policy? And how diverse is your group already? And what efforts have you made toward work-life balance and so forth? And if the companies don't have policies in place that are like that, they're saying, no, we're not sending our people to you because you don't have a positive environment for our people. And they're trying to not change the candidates in order to get them jobs, but change the workplace and the attitudes of the workplace, which means that it would be a better place for everybody to work. I'm sure all of you folks who work 60, 70, 80 hours in your high-tech jobs, wouldn't you have liked a little bit more work-life balance? And if the effort to have a more accepting workplace, everybody profits when that happens. And so they said that they are targeting women in technology, but it's all underrepresented groups. Diversity, certainly racial diversity, cultural diversity, also getting more people with disabilities into the workplace. So they're helping all of those different places, and they want to emphasize and promote companies that will hire and train a more diverse population. And then they also work with companies to help companies identify unconscious bias and create programs that will alert that. But they said anybody can apply for jobs, can post jobs to their post resumes to their website, and they will give. They provide other services as well. They will help people with their resumes. They said if somebody's been out of the workplace for a couple of years and needs to have mock interview practice, they'll conduct that. So they'll help people in lots of different ways. And
I was trying to sign up right just now. Like I looked them up on Facebook, and they have a thing to sign up, and their page where you put your email, their name, et cetera, kicks back. So if there's anyone here who's a web designer or a developer, maybe they could, use some help with that.
Oh, okay. So
a little surprising.
So
I love the concept.
So Jenny Boo,
out.
and so maybe that's just on a phone, mobile app.
Could be.
But it's good to know. We have a room full of people. Many of you are technology folks. So she said she just tried to apply on her phone.
Sign up for their mailing list.
To sign up for their mailing list, and it kicked her out. So anyway, good to know. So there's a need.
Sorry to interrupt.
So workplace diversity, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, the numbers are there. According to that article anyway, gender diverse companies that have a great deal of diversity in terms of gender, have a 15% higher return on investment. Racially diverse companies, even more, 35% higher return on investment. Recent study, companies with women in leadership positions, not necessarily the CEO, but some kind of leadership positions, the companies have stronger profits. And so there are certain, and of course you don't want to paint this with a brush that's too broad and say necessarily that is the ticket, but there are certain characteristics that perhaps lend themselves well to leadership, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I did want to tell you, what did I want to tell you? When they were talking about why you want to have a diverse workforce, so you get lots of perspectives. A company where everybody is the same kind of person, they see the world in this very same way, right? When you have people who are all the same race, all the same age group, all similar kinds of backgrounds, they see things in the same way, and often don't appreciate the perspectives that other kinds of people bring in. If Chevrolet had more Hispanics in their design team, and whatever, maybe it's a marketing team, I don't know who creates the names for the cars, but they probably wouldn't have shipped one of their best-selling cars in the United States to South America with the name Nova, which I think you've all heard of that. That's a famous story. Nova in Spanish means doesn't go. Couldn't figure out why it wasn't selling. If they had some Hispanics in that team, it could be they wouldn't have made that foobar. And they talked about the iPhone, and that's in this article as well. They launched a feature that comes automatically with the iPhone, where it is a health app, keeps track of your your heart rate and your caloric intake and your sleep and all of that stuff, just like a Fitbit. And they said one of the things that it did not keep track of was reproductive cycle, and that the women were saying that would be helpful. And they took a lot of heat from that. They were criticized for that, for being so dense that they wouldn't think that was a physical piece of data, a little factoid that some people would want to keep track of. And so they said if they had any women in their design room, they would never have made that mistake. They would have had that perspective, that attitude, that additional market viewpoint. And so obviously the more different perspectives you have, that's why Jerry wants 10 volunteers of all kinds of different people to look at his new offering and give some feedback. That's why the Indeed people want to show you their website and see, do you think these features are good? What should we add? What would be useful to you with your perspective and your job search attitude? So anyway, all of that is useful. Arches in Afghanistan. Years and years ago, when we were really actively in the war in Afghanistan, I remember hearing something on the radio that said that there was an area that was totally destroyed, bombed out, nothing, rubble, total destruction, and the only thing that was standing were a few arches. And I went online and looked at the photographs of that, and it was true. And it was something about that architectural shape, that curve, that made that a little bit sturdier and able to withstand the bombing. And it occurred to me that curved line is a strength thing. It works that way. When you think of a tree in a storm, the willows that bend can withstand the winds, whereas the total strong oaks, snap off in a big storm. And sometimes the straightened, the thing that looks strong turns out not to be, and the thing that looks weak and bending and suppliant and so forth is the thing that is ultimately stronger. Another little factoid: when I was a real little kid, there was a show on TV that had an artist that would teach you how to draw, and his name was John Nagy. And I remember watching the step by step how you try to get little shapes that you start with. And I remember that when you draw a female, the shapes were all rounded. And so it was the face and the breast and the stomach was round and the butt was obviously round. And you had all, even the thighs were elliptical. They were all curves. And when he drew a man, the form that he started with was an inverted triangle. The triangle is the strongest shape that we have. So it was an inverted triangle, and that was the man shape. And so again, it was curves, circles. The thing about circles and curves, women have always been represented in that curvaceous kind of thing. In Hawaiian, the woman is like this, so it's the shape, but it's also a curved line. When domes were a big deal, lots of people were building dome houses, and where did I put it? I read something 100 years ago by an Indian chief, who will remain nameless because he's forgotten, about circles. And he said, "The Great Spirit gave us a world of circles. The sun and moon are circles, the horizon is a circle, the rainbow is a circle. Birds live in circular nests. The homes of animals that burrow in the ground are circles, as is the cave of the great bear. Circles mean wholeness, safety, security. The Indian lives in a circular teepee. Inside, the Indian people sit in a circle and pass the pipe. Life itself is a circle. When you live in a circular house, you are one with nature. You are part of the circle of life." Circles have forever sort of represented that. There was a magazine even that was Family Circle, and it was a woman's magazine, and it talked about cellulite and recipes and so forth. You're never going to find a man's magazine called the Family Circle. It's just, it doesn't work. It's a safe, nurturing shape that sort of speaks comfort and security. You circle the wagons for safety and security. So there is that. King Arthur had the round table. And this sort of brings me to what is a C person and a T person. I don't want to say that this is necessarily men and women, because there are lots of men who I believe are actually C people, and they have that protective, nurturing kind of personality. And there are certainly women that are T people. And I use T not necessarily for testosterone, but it's that rigid, strong. There are lots of words. So Clark just said territorial. There are lots of words that you could start with that are C words and T words, but people that are a little bit more pliant, and people that are a little bit more rigid. And that can be, maybe there are more females that are a little bit, that we would consider in the compliant kind of category, and more men who are a little bit more rigid. But it's really, are you a C person or are you a T person? And many people are a combination of both, and I think that's where you become the best. You're the best leader, the best manager, when you're able to combine both of those. So I think King Arthur, even though he was a king, he was a manager. I don't even know if he actually lived, but his attitude toward managing, toward ruling Britain, he's a C person. And he wanted a round table so that nobody would be more important than anybody else. Everybody would be equal, everybody would share in this circle, as opposed to the boardroom where the head is at the head of the table and has more power. Another difference between men and women. Stress and hormones. For the longest time, they would do studies on how people reacted to stress, and they knew that when you're in a stressful situation, a lot of different chemicals and hormones are secreted into the body to help you make the next move. And adrenaline was one of the biggies, but there were others as well. And this prepared you for fight or flight. And it was years and years and years and years of accepting this as truth before somebody said, you know, we never have tested women to see if they have the same juices and hormones and chemicals secreted in their body when they're under stress. And when they finally tested women, they discovered, wow, it's different. And what happens with women is the hormone that is, or the chemical that is shot into their body is oxytocin, and oxytocin, I'm sorry, and that one does not fortify your muscles to run. It makes you want to kind of join with others, and it's because they feel they surmise that in prehistoric times, when danger came, it was an invasion or it was a predator of some sort, and so they did have the warriors, the hunters did have to either run away or fight, whereas what the women had to do was go back into retreat. They had to go back into the cave. They had to gather around the children and protect the gene pool and the continuation of the tribe, so to speak. And so what happens when women go through a stressful situation is that they join forces, they unite, they tend and befriend. And it's counter to what men tend to do. I have a friend who lost a daughter, and I said, "Did you go to counseling?" And he said, "No." He said, "I do my own counseling. I go out in the woods, and I spend a lot of time by myself, and I work through it." Women usually, when they go through some kind of a loss, it's a support group. It's sharing and sharing and helping each other get through that. When I say, I think to find a job you should go through, you should have a SWAT team. Lots more women in Launchpad have formed SWAT teams than have men. They would rather look for a job on their own. There is a, oh geez, we're really, okay, I may not finish this. I maybe I'll give you just one more thing or talk fast. There is a book called You Just Don't Understand by a sociolinguist named Deborah Tannen. The first book she ever wrote was That's Not What I Meant. And it was how somebody can make a speech in one part of the country and it's perceived very differently in another part of the country. So politicians were all about that. The last chapter of the book was about males and females and how they interpret language. And when she would go on a book tour, 95% of the questions would be about that chapter. So she thought, well, I better write something else about men and women and how they interpret language. And so that was why that You Just Don't Understand, and that's all about men and women. She studied males and females from the age of 3 when you start talking to octogenarians, and found that a 3-year-old male and an 80-year-old male had more in common than a 3-year-old male and a 3-year-old female. The differences were already evident in their conversation. And she said the C people, and this could be boys or girls, have more rapport talk. It's more, let's do this, or how about, or it was more sharing and that sort of thing. And males or the T people had more report talk. It was more factual. It was more imperative. I'm going to be this and you be that. It was not as conciliatory or as collaborative, and from a very early age. And okay, this will be my last story, and then I'll quit because we have to do Toastmasters very quickly. I sent that book, I loved that book, and I sent it to my little sister. My little sister has a PhD in applied math, and at that time she was teaching at Idaho State University. And so she's in a very T-dominated state. There's a lot of Mormon influence in Pocatello. It's right above Utah. And so it's a kind of a male-dominated state. It's a male-dominated university town, and she's in the math department, so there were very few women that were there. And she said that every week they would have a meeting of the math faculty, and one person each week would make a presentation. And in this particular meeting, there were only 2 females who were there, my sister and this other woman, and the other woman, it was her time to make a presentation. And so she stood up and made her presentation. She sat back down next to my sister and she said, "Oh, it wasn't very good." And my little sister said, "Well, I thought it was very good." And my sister said, after reading your book, she said, it occurred to me, we were the only 2 people in that room who would ever have said either one of those things. When you think about it. They were C people in a world of T people. Rodney King, he's a man, but his famous statement, his most famous statement of all time, can't we all just get along? It's a C statement. And maybe, I don't know, man, maybe he was a C person, in spite of the fact that he was male. C people, lots of those kinds of words. They believe in communication, collaboration, commiseration, consolation. Oops, I should have taken that off. All of those are soft skills, and these days they say soft skills are valued in the workplace more than any other skills. It's hard skills that get you hired and the lack of soft skills that get you fired. And so all of those are really, really important. Okay, last story. I said that was this is really the last story. I have a friend who is a professor at UT in the marine biology department, and she said that when they were going to go off for their very first ocean trip to study marine biology, part of their training was to see how you would deal with an emergency at sea. And so they had some kind of a simulation, and they said if there is a fire on board a ship, so there's lots of smoke, you're not going to be able to see, and your mission, your objective is to get from where you are in the hold or wherever and to get into a lifeboat, even though your vision is obscured. And so they had all of these people blindfolded, and they said, okay, fire is started, fire, and you got to get to the lifeboat. The sea people, most of whom were women, joined together. They held hands, and they somebody was feeling along the wall, and they found a fire extinguisher. Somebody heard a bird, and they said, I think the outside door is here. They shared information. Every single one of them made it to the lifeboat. The men did not work as a team. 2 of them made it to the lifeboats just on their own, and the rest of them refused to ask directions. They ended up trying to solve it on their own, and when the time period was up, they were still down the hole. So nice. But lots of you have gone through leadership training, whether through the Boy Scouts or through different kinds of societies, and almost always the activities were supposed to get you to work together as a group. And the C people tend to do that naturally, and the T people really feel that they can do better on their own. So there's that. Interview shift, I'm the greatest, to how can I help? Those of you who were at the thing last night, that's what you see. How can I help? What are your problems? How can I help?